Session. My name is Alvin, and I'm basically working with SAP Finance for over the last 14, 15 years. And also, you might have seen that in the recent times, right, there are a lot of S4 HANA Finance projects which are coming up, and there are multiple reasons for that. The reason is first reason is SAP has introduced this SAP S4 HANA Finance, right, in the year I think 2016 onwards. They are rolling this up, right? And now they have also given a timeline by 2027, right? Those who are in the older versions, like which they called as the ECC version of SAP, they need to migrate to the S4 HANA. So that is one reason. And apart from that, right, S4 HANA gives them a lot of possibilities. Like there are, you know, it has a much enhanced reporting. The integration also, which I will show with the central finance, is much more enhanced. So that's the reason it has. There are a lot of like possibilities when you go with the S4 HANA feature. So that I will also try to explain in this short presentation, so that you at least get an overview of why it is important to learn this. Okay, and then what I will do is maybe in the subsequent sessions there will be a full plan for you based on the modules that you select, because we have multiple modules to offer, which is like S4 HANA Simple Finance as well as S4 HANA Central Finance. You can make a choice on that and opt for it. And what are the disadvantages and advantages, or and which one you should go for as a fresher, that I will also guide you through. Okay. Let me know once you're able to see my screen.
Yes.
Okay, so this will be the agenda for today. So we'll start off, we have started off with the introduction, right? Then I will try to introduce S4 HANA to you, like what does it mean? And you will be seeing that with S4, right, there is always something kind of letters which comes at the end. For example, S4 HANA 1609, 1709, then 1809, 1909, 2020, all these things comes, right? So what does those mean also? But I will try to explain. So basically SAP releases the new versions, right? Or maybe the new uh, I would say the new system upgrades on a particular month. For example, in 2016 it released the update on 09, which is the September month. In 2020 it released the update in the month of October, right? So so that's the reason. Basically, they have like in whichever year they release the versions, right? They put the version name along with that, along with S4 HANA. So you know like which month it is released, and they give a list of updates also. What are the updates which has come in those versions? Okay. So this is so as you can understand, right? SAP S4 has gone through a lot of evolution over the time, so we will talk about that. Then we'll also talk about the key features that that is offering. Mostly the slides are focused on central finance, so I will talk about that. And at the same time, I will be also talking about the simple finance, what it offers, and what is the basic architecture of it, and how do you also deploy the central finance. That is also a very important strategy with the organizations take up. That I will also share with you. Then I will do a quick comparison between what is central finance and what is S4 HANA Finance. Then how do you pass on the data? Let's say, uh, because when we are talking about a company, right, you can have an organization which is, mm, let's say I am talking about a group of hospitals, right? So let's say in Pune, right, you have a few group of government hospitals, right? Now, what if they want to share the data in a common platform, right? So they must be sending the data through some application interface, right? So how do they do that, and how central finance can also facilitate that? That I will also explain. Then there is something which is known as the replication of data, because as you can see, right, if data need to be passed from multiple systems, you need to also think about the replication of data, which I will be going through. So there are a few topics that we will be covering. So let's start on with the first one. Okay. So S4, okay, so this one is actually this talks about the central finance, where S4 HANA central finance system was installed at a sidecar. What does it mean, sidecar? Sidecar means like you have the main transaction data mm, uh, booked in one system, which is known as the, let's say you have an older version of SAP, right, where the data entry is being happening. Then some of the maybe hospitals are using, let's say, with the newer versions of SAP, which is the S4 HANA Finance, right? So you book the data in those systems, and the data flows in to this particular central finance system. So that is known as a sidecar approach. So basically, S4 HANA Central Finance is installed at a sidecar, so that receives the financial accounting documents in real time. Means like whatever the data is booked in the other system, right, it flows immediately to this S4 Central Finance system in real time from the SAP. Or sometimes if you have some non-SAP system, there can be a methodology also, or using which you can let the data flow into the system. So this is about the central finance. But before going into central finance, I want to also talk about what is S4 HANA Simple Finance, right? So in the Simple Finance system also, you will have a complete ERP package where you will have all the different modules, just as think as Isaiah has told, right? So um, I think Isaiah or Harry, you are working in the with the HR module, right? So in the HR module, you might have
Yes,
seen that
yes,
you have employees logging in their timesheet. You have the payroll kind of calculations also
yes,
will be made through,
compensation. Yeah,
right? So all
yep,
these
yeah,
modules are you might have seen that these are quite tightly integrated, because once maybe we clock the hours in the timesheet, right? So there is an impact on like maybe or like also when we apply for the leaves, so that also reflect in your
yes,
payroll calculation, everything, correct?
yes. It gets
So,
processed.
so as you can understand, SAP is a very tightly integrated system. So, and you have all the different kinds of components playing together so that you can achieve the function. For example, the HR module functionality may be have like those who are having the access to the HR module will be having some privileged access, because they those are sensitive data which may not be applicable or may not be viewable by all the employees in the organizations, right? So that's the reason they have a kind of authorization controls using GRC. Then in finance, when the data flows in, there should be some particular authorization rights using which you can see the data. And in the S4 HANA Finance, how it has changed from the previous version is they use they use OLAP as well as OLTP. What means is traditionally the approach has always been you post the transaction, right? You book the data into the system, it gets like stored in the database, and from the database you extract the reports, right? So that is the traditional approach. So in the S4 HANA Finance field, right, you have the OLAP, which means online analytical processing as well as the transaction processing. That means on the fly, right, once you book the transaction, immediately you will have a pictorial representation of how it has changed. So basically, the analysis and the transaction can go side by side. Okay, so that is quite a important kind of feature which has come up with the new version of S4. Obviously there has been much upgrades in the database which we are using in the new S4 version, which is HANA 2.0, is much powerful, which enables us to do all those things. So apart from that, so this is one example of the advantage of using S4 HANA. Apart from that, you also have the different modules, right, which has been simplified quite a fair bit. Like for example, the asset accounting module, you have the usage of the universal journal, the universal accounting journal table, which consolidates the data from multiple modules into one. So you don't have redundant data storage. So those kinds of thing has also come up with the S4 HANA Finance. So this is how the S4 HANA Finance has evolved. So it has started with a, like initially there was a traditional version of SAP, which I would say was it was quite good, but at the same time there was a lot of redundant data storage which was being done, and at the same time it was slower compared to the new version. So in the new version, right, you have the analytical capability at a much higher level, because you have the user interface is also much simpler. So I will go through those parts one by one when we go through this training in details, right? So and also okay, so this talks about the central finance. So as I've told you, now you have the S4 HANA finance. Let's say one block. So let's say this is your central finance system, right? And this will be your S4 HANA. This can be your ECC, and this can be your non-SAP system. So all this data, right, it flows in from your like from your S4 HANA, then from your ECC as well as the non-SAP system into the central finance system in real time using this sidecar approach and the data replication tools that we will be having, right? So what do you achieve with this? So you need not stop the usage of this three system, right? You can continue using this system, and at the same time the data and at the same time you can make use of this particular box, which is the SAP Central Finance, and use the maximum capability to do all the reporting based on this data, right? So this is the advantage of central finance. So basically, it's a non-disruptive deployment option. So it is kind of a stepping stone, I would say, for the organizations before they start using. So they realize the benefits of using this new version of SAP, and then they slowly migrate over. Let's say this also gets migrated over first, then this will be moved first, and then this also may be moved, right? One by one, you will move the all your the boxes to a consolidated one, and it is very similar to what you will say, like in the previous world, right? There was kind of a BW reporting where you used to transfer the data periodically, but in this central finance, what is happens is it moves the data in real time, and also you like whenever the data gets booked into the ECC system, let's say you have the data available in your S4 central finance system as well, right? So it's a non-disruptive deployment option. So is this part clear? Like, what is the difference between central finance and simple finance?
Yes, yes,
You got an idea about that, right? So as for simple finance is kind of a standalone ERP system, and central finance is kind of having a collective approach where it's collecting the data in real time from multiple ERP systems, right?
yes,
So basically what you can see here is the same thing that I have told you. So there has been a lot of development which has happened with SAP over the time, right? So and it is upgrading its product on a regular basis, so that whichever are the business needs. For example, let's say you have the GCC tax implemented. GCC means like, so like for example in the Gulf countries, right? So there has been a new tax regime which has come up, so for which like there are few limitations, or there are few categories of taxes which needs to be brought over. So what SAP has already done, it has introduced some patch level to handle that, and which can be used in multiple versions. So how you will deploy those changes, what are like how you import those changes into the system, right? So this those can be decided about the by the patch level which SAP has already provided, right? So those kind of things, right? Like, so whenever there is a new upgrade, you will always see that SAP brings in those innovations to handle those upgrades, right? And also, as you can, as you always know, that that most of the big organizations are running on SAP, right? So that's the reason. So whether it be simple, like the simple small enterprise or bigger enterprises, right? So they are able to run their business using this SAP ERP software, which is very kind of tightly integrated, right? So it has evolved over the time from the art from the R3 versions to ECC, now to the S4 HANA, and with multiple components like central finance, simple finance, etc. Right? So coming to central finance, right? Some in central finance we have uh, like the first approach is like, for example, you have multiple systems, correct? Because you are fetching the data from system one, system two, system three. Let's say three systems. So you should be able to navigate this data is from which system. The system navigation approach also we will see first. Then you have AIF. AIF means application interface framework. So basically that means you are interfacing the data from multiple applications using a particular rule, which is known as a framework, right? And you will be also able to monitor what is the status of those data updates, right? So using this AIF. So that also we will see, right? And how you monitor that AIFs also, that we will see. Parallel accounting means you have, let's say, a data flowing into your system in IFRS, but you also need to record the data maybe in the non-reading ledgers, right? So you can also handle that using this parallel accounting approach, correct? Parallel accounting approach means, like, let's say you have entities which are spread across multiple geographies, right? For example, in US, in Europe, maybe in Asia Pacific, in few countries, and in India, right? So in all the different countries, right? So they, some of the countries follow US GAAP, some of the countries follow, let's say, the Singapore accounting standards. Some of them follow kind of IFRS standards, right? So if you want to, if the organization wants to follow the IFRS accounting requirement and as well as follow the local accounting reporting standards, right? So then there is an option of having parallel accounting, which I will definitely go through when we go, when we go further in our training. So that is one, right? And then what about data replication? So these are the four kind of uh, key boxes, right, in central finance. So you have seen the system, you have seen how the data flows in. You can also handle additional features, like for example, reporting as per the multiple local requirement. Now, if there be some kind of data, right, which needs to be replicated. For example, you have vendor data which is created in system one, vendor data is created in system two. uh, like how do you want to replicate that data into the central finance system? That is also handled here. So there is a data replication activity also which can take place, which can take care of this. Okay, so these are the key components that we will study when we go through our central finance, right? So for your SAP S4HANA's simple finance, right? So this parts will be, so AIF and the data replication, I would say. So these are more key for the central finance system, right? For the simple finance, you have a kind of you have the um, you have the respective SAP ERP system, right, where you carry out all the different transactions, right? So it is not receiving the transactions from the other system. So that is the key difference between central finance and the simple finance, right? So one more important thing to highlight is in your the new versions of SAP, right? Previously, SAP used to have the Oracle version of the database, right? But moving forward, right, it only uses the SAP HANA data, right? So the source of data where it is getting stored in the SAP HANA database, and there are kind of like what is the advantage of using a SAP HANA database? Like as I told, like the speed in which the system works has increased drastically over the years, and the reason for that is basically it does not use the like the traditional approach of kind of first it reads through all the rows and then it identifies which column, and then it, so so it has more kind of cell wise approach where, like for example, just when we go through the Excel, right, we can tell like A12, right? A12 is one of the cell number, so you know what where exactly that sits in, and with that A12 as the key you can find out the records associated with it. Like for example, the cell, you have the cell, right? You have the columns as well as the rows, right? So let's say in the columns are A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, and in the rows you have 1, 2, 3, 4 up to the number of rows it is having. So if you have A12, that means it is referring to the first column, 12th row, right? So yeah, so with that kind of record you can identify what are the maybe records attached to it, and you can find the details around it, right? So so that's the advantage of the HANA database. So it's basically it focuses on a cell based approach, right? Sometimes we call it as a columnar approach, and then it finds the data records associated. Okay, so the next part, what it says, the same thing that we have covered in the previous part. Like, so basically, your SAP Central Finance, right, reads the data from multiple systems, and you have also supporting tools along with the Central Finance. For example, here we have the MDG, which is known as the Master Data Governance, because I have told you about the data replication, right? But it's also important to store the data which is accurate and non-redundant. For example, in three systems, let's say you have some insurance provider, let's say AIA insurance provider is there in the three systems, right? So you want to replicate the same vendor from the three systems into your new box, right? Rather, you will like to have some data controls over this, or maybe you want to review that data once it comes to your system, right? So, so MDG plays a very important role, which is known as the master data governance. It's a module which allows you maybe the data stakeholders to review the data before it's actually entered into the system, right? Then we have this box which talks about the SAP Fiori. Fiori is kind of a UI tool. UI means like it's a user interface tool, which helps you which helps us to navigate in a much better way. So what happens is in this UI, right? Previously in SAP, we were always going through the button of the where we had to enter the transaction code, or maybe we go through the some particular screens to access a particular transaction code, right? So in the SAP Fiori, right, users are only given those tiles which they access. Like so, so they are not confused with more kind of like uh, like they don't have a elaborate menu from which they can choose. So they are already given a list of uh, maybe the tiles which they need to access, and from there they click on it, and maximum 3 clicks they can access the transaction, right? So it is much kind of mhm, user friendly, I would say, this SAP Fiori. But from my experience, what I see, there are kind of advantages as well as disadvantages. Sometimes the user prefers the traditional way, and sometimes they are also kind of they get the maximum benefit when they use the SAP Fiori tool as well, right? So definitely, when it comes to the SAP tool, right? So there has to be kind of uh, like as you can see, any ERP system goes through some routine audits and checks, right? So SAP also has kind of frameworks which can support them, like for example SOA audits, right? How do you handle that? And also if you have any segregation of duties, how do you maybe resolve the conflicts, or how do you handle them? Those are clearly documented in the SAP system. And you also have a risk aversion strategy in the system as well. Okay, about the application interface framework, at least I have talked to you, because how it is a central component of this SAP Central Finance, because you interface the data from multiple applications into your Central Finance system. And this is kind of a key block structure which explains the data flow. Okay. Any questions till now?
No.
Okay, so now the thing is, this talks about your SAP Central Finance versus the S4 Finance. I would not say it is kind of versus, but it tells you how both systems can go hand in hand and maybe complement each other, right? So first of all, with both this Central Finance and SAP Central Finance, right? They run on SAP HANA database. And also the reason why we are using Central Finance instead of SAP BW is to remove the redundancy. So basically the data is flowing as a real time, right? So you need not wait for maybe the end of the day to fetch the data record for the day, right? And it is more flexible, and also you can have the different system coexist with each other when you implement the Central Finance, right? So basically, you take the advantage of the new database, the look and feel of it, and as well as maybe continue using the older versions also till you are completely ready to adopt the newer version of SAP, which is the S4 HANA Finance. Okay, so this is how maybe how some of the companies, right, the bigger organizations, they adopt this approach, especially those which are in, like, let's say, a very distributed manufacturing setup, or maybe, for example, in the healthcare, right, where they operate in different clusters, right? For example, you might have, let's imagine Apollo, right? So it is spread out across mm, multiple regions in India, right? And each and if and it also can have some subsidiaries. right now, if the subsidiaries are using some different maybe ERP system, right? So and so it can be a mammoth task, right? Moving them from one ERP system over like maybe over a short period of time. So what sometimes they do is they set up the central finance system, and they take on the data from the older version of this SAP system or the existing version of this system, and slowly they plan the migration or the move to the newer version, which is S4HANA, right? So this is kind of a staggered approach which most of the organizations take as a risk aversion strategy, right? So in this, right, it has like it has talked about like how does it look like. So actually, okay, so if I try to show you, but like we will be having the system access also when we go through the training. So there you will see, right, in the application interface framework you will see like for example, here you will see that, okay, so on this date what are the data record which has been interfaced, how many are in error, how many are in are successfully interfaced, and then you also have an option, right, to drill down to the error details once you go through this monitoring tool, right? So those kinds of flexibility you get with this SAP application interface framework. And now and also, like for example, if there be any master data errors, right, so the master data team needs to be notified over that. Let's say the document could not be booked because the vendor code is missing, right? Then you need to inform the master data team, right? Okay, look, this master data, due to this issue, right, your document could not be booked. Can you please review if the master data needs to be created or not? So they will be doing that review, and then they will be coming back with the update around it. So you can also it is just like one type of error. So there can be other configuration errors also. Let's say they are trying to book an entry without a tax code, but this is a tax relevant account. So those kinds of things also can come up. So you have several possibility of data analysis as well as resolution on those particular errors using this AIA framework, right? And also, as I have told you, you also have the option to activate as well as replicate the data from multiple systems using this central finance app. So for replication of the data, what are the options that we have? Like you can have the data replicated. As I've told you, like the central finance can accept the data from SAP as well as non-SAP. So the in SAP also it can be kind of older version of SAP and newer version of SAP, right? So how do you establish that connection between the SAP system? That can be done using the RFC connection. Okay, RFC means remote function call. So basically the you are this particular just as we do it, right? Like for example, let's say you want to order some food for delivery. So what do? You just place that order over the app, and so basically you are calling the vendor to deliver that food to you. So same way, right? Here your central finance is basically calling the other system and fetching the data in the required format from them, right? So that is known as the data replication. So in the data replication here, there is some options which are given. Like for example, you can replicate the material cost estimate. You can replicate like the activity rates, right? And also you can have the replication of the master data, so like GL, vendor, customer, all those things. And also you have an app which is known as the AIF, where you can analyze the postings which are in error and also all sort of things, right? So those things has been explained in this particular slide. Okay, and this is basically how your uh, we call it the SLT, which is known as the replication tool in SAP, right? So here you see all your posting which has been posted, just as I was showing, right? So for this particular maybe entity code, what are the correct entries, what has been booked successfully, what are the ones which are missing, all those things, right? So we will go through this screen. So I think this is very small and hardly legible. But once I go through the system, right, it will be very clear, right? And apart from that, yes, as you know, like SAP is a very tightly integrated system. So we will base our knowledge of what we gather from the central finance as well as the simple finance when we go through the training, and then that will pave the way for you to do some advanced training side, most maybe on the financial planning and so on, right? So hopefully you find this particular session as informative, and what we still have kind of, I think UpTaught has already have having the plan to for the training for this areas as well, but my core area is mostly like I am focused on the finance module, which is the simple finance and central finance, and the different versions. How do you handle different projects related to that? So on those bit, I will be able to help you out when we go through the training. Any questions or any doubts which you might have, you can let me know.
Yeah. How this Harry here?
Yes, I have.
How does it relates to SAP SD?
Yes. So basically, SAP SD, right? So it is very tightly integrated with your SAP Finance, right? So in SD, right? Okay. So what we call is we have an organization structure which is related to each modules, right? So in SAP SD, let's say we talk about the sales areas, which is a combination of sales org, distribution channel, and division, right? And now this particular sales organizations are assigned to the company. Even the sales areas are also assigned to the company code. So that is the first point of integration. Later on, we will also see, like let's say you are trying to do sales of a particular material, but the material in itself, right, it has to link up with some GL accounts so that you can recognize the accounting entry, right? So how do you do that? Those we will see also when we go through the integration between SD and FI. Okay.
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
No problem.
Sir, Rishikesh here.
Yeah.
Sir, I need to get a little bit explanation about AIS application in
Interface framework.
interface framework.
Yeah.
So I got a little bit confused while you were explaining. So just,
Yes, sure, no problem. So I think okay, so for this AIF, right?
yes, yes. Okay.
Let's say we talk about this. What is the purpose of AIF? Tell me, Rishikesh. So basically, where we are trying to interface the data from multiple applications into the central finance. Because what we have told is central finance we are using as a sidecar approach. Sidecar means there is a, let's say you have a system over here, and then we have three systems on this side.
I saw the diagram.
Yeah, right. So so that means when the data flows into your central finance system, you should be able to monitor, right, whether it has been posted correctly or not,
Okay.
right?
Okay.
So that is what your application interface framework helps.
We
Now,
keep the track of the data which is transferred to the SAP.
Central finance. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So now the one more important thing is the issues from the data, like the reasons from the data errors can be different, right? There can be a master data issues, there can be a configuration issues, like whatever it be. So those like the AIF not only helps you to monitor the data, but also helps to flag that this is what are the errors, and you can send the notification to the responsible person to correct that.
Okay, so we can track as well as update the errors and change
Yeah.
it.
Yes. Yeah, you won't be able to, but for example, let's say the basis team is monitoring, right, the flow of the data.
Okay.
Correct. Then they won't be able to post, but what will happen is they will collect the data, like for them the error, and there will be rule whenever there's a, let's say, a GL master data issue, it will be going to the GL accountant team for them to review it.
Okay.
Something like
that. Okay.
Yeah.
As per department, they change.
So it is not only an application interface monitoring tool, but it has a mechanism to do the analysis, do the record correction, and also to have a complete picture of. That's the reason it is known as the application interface framework.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Yes. Any other question? If no, then I think we can end the session for today, and hope you have enjoyed learning in this particular session. And please get back. Yeah, so hope your understanding of the central finance and simple finance is also clear, so you can make a choice on which kind of module you want to go through, so that we can plan the training accordingly. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks, Alvin.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, guys. Take care.
Like, subscribe, and press the bell icon.